I disliked the business of Hollywood intensely. When I had that choice of Star Wars being a success, I said, I'm going to try to make a go for it. And so I invested in the next movie and borrowed money from a bank and everything. I had everything at stake. I did it primarily because I didn't want the studios to tell me what to do. I didn't want them coming and commenting on my work and putting their little ideas in there. And because I needed to make sure I controlled the vision and not have it be diluted by a lot of other people, I ended up with a company, and the company was successful. We're the only ones.
Lucas had been at the top of our acquisition list ever since we'd completed the Marvel deal. And I'd been thinking about how to approach George in a way that wouldn't offend him, with the suggestion that he sell us the marvelous worlds that he'd created. And in May 2011, we were reopening the Star Wars attractions, Star Tours they're called. I knew George was going to Orlando to rededicate the attraction as a favor to the company and his friends in Imagineering, and I decided to join him. I thought this might give me a chance to at least float the idea with George and get some sense of whether he'd ever consider selling to us. On the day of the rededication of Star Tours in Orlando, I set up a breakfast with him at the Brown Derby, which was near the attraction in our Hollywood Studios park. The restaurant doesn't normally open before lunch, but I asked them to set up a table just for us, so we would have privacy. When George and his fiancée, Melody Hobson, arrived, they were surprised to see that no one was there but me. We sat down and had a lovely breakfast, and about halfway through it, I asked George if he'd ever thought about selling. I tried to be clear and direct without offending him. He was 68 years old at the time, and I said, I don't want to be fatalistic, George, and please stop me if you would rather not have this conversation, but I think it's worth putting this on the table. What happens down the road? You don't have any heirs who are going to run the company for you. They may control it, but they're not going to run it. Shouldn't you determine who protects or carries on your legacy? He nodded as I talked. I'm not really ready to sell, he said, but you're right. And if I decide to, there isn't anyone I want to sell to but you. And then he brought up what we'd done with Pixar. You did that right, he said. You took care of them. If I get around to it, you're the only call I'll make. He said something else that I kept in mind in every subsequent conversation we had. When I die, the first line of my obituary is going to read, Star Wars creator George Lucas. It was so much a part of who he was, which of course I knew. But having him look into my eyes and say it like that underscored the most important factor in these conversations. This wasn't negotiating to buy a business. It was negotiating to be the keeper of George's legacy.
Today, I am proud to announce the Walt Disney Company is acquiring Lucasfilm, the global entertainment company founded by George Lucas and the home of the legendary Star Wars franchise. In addition to getting the rights to one of the greatest family franchises and epic stories of all time, Disney is also acquiring all of Lucasfilm's operating businesses, including Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound. George Lucas is a true visionary and an innovative epic storyteller who has defined modern filmmaking with unforgettable characters and amazing stories. The Star Wars universe now has more than 17,000 characters inhabiting several thousand planets and spanning 20,000 years. And this gives Disney infinite inspiration and opportunities to continue the epic Star Wars saga. Fans can expect a new feature film, Star Wars Episode 7, in theaters worldwide in 2015. And there will be more feature films, as well as consumer products, television projects, games, and theme park attractions. We're thrilled that George has entrusted the future of his extraordinary legacy to the Walt Disney Company and recognize what an honor it is. We truly understand the responsibility that comes with being the caretakers of such iconic characters that are beloved by hundreds of millions all over the world. Disney has a unique ability to grow strong brands and expand fantastic creative content, as we've proven with our successful acquisitions of both Pixar and Marvel, and the addition of Lucasfilm will further our growth strategy and create even more opportunity for Disney to drive significant long-term value for our shareholders.
Got very involved with Disney in the 80s and working in the parks, and I've always had a fondness for Disney. At the same time, as I've gone through my career, I realized at some point I needed to retire, and I wanted to go on and do other things, things in philanthropy and doing more experimental kind of films, but I couldn't really drag my company into that, and I felt it was time for me to start thinking about retiring, and I've been doing that for the last 4 years. And one of the most important shifts that I had was I found Kathy Kennedy, who I'd been working with for 40 years, and asked her if she wanted to come and be a co-chairman with me and get ready to take over the company and take over the franchise and do everything. And once that piece was in place, I knew then I could step away and actually retire. The final block in that was to find a good, solid home for the company. And the first place I thought was Disney. They're large enough, and the match of what our two companies are is just perfect, because we're like a mini Disney. We have the same kind of operations, we do the same kind of thing, and I've worked with Disney over the years, and I know how they operate. So it was a perfect match of two companies that are constructed similarly, do the same kind of product, and I think it'll give me a chance to go off and explore my own interests, at the same time feel completely confident that Disney will take good care of the franchise I've built. Kathy and I have been working on future Star Wars films, and the main reason I brought Kathy on is, rather than quit, I wanted to have it move forward, but I needed somebody I trusted who could take that franchise and make it work the way I intended it to. So once Kathy came on board, we started working with writers and started working on all the processes of doing the films. So we've got a plan for 7, 8, and 9, which is the end of the trilogy, and other films also. So we have a large group of ideas and characters and books and all kinds of things. We could go on making Star Wars for the next 100 years. Obviously, I've been talking about retiring for several years now. I wanted to get into sort of another stage of life where I'm not in the film business anymore, and I don't have to run a corporation. And it occurred to me one day that the perfect person to take over the company was Kathy. It's just such a perfect fit. And I felt that I really wanted to put the company somewhere in a larger entity which would protect it.
Given the tremendous success that Disney's had with Marvel and with Pixar, and now adding Lucasfilm to that, I think we couldn't be at a better home. Disney defines family entertainment, and in many ways, it's the best company possible to take Star Wars into the future.
Well, I always said I wasn't going to do any more, and that's true, because I'm not going to do any more. But that doesn't mean I'm unwilling to turn it over to Kathy to do more. Mm-hmm. I have story treatments of 7, 8, and 9, and a bunch of other movies, and obviously we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So, I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and
make great movies.
We are absolutely going to make Star Wars movies, and we're in the midst of the really fun part of the process, which is we're sitting down with a couple of writers and we're starting to discuss ideas and we're starting to talk about what those stories might be.
I'm doing this so that the films will have a longer life, and so that more fans and people can enjoy them into the future. It's a very big universe I've created, and there's a lot of stories that are sitting in there.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
And what do you see your role as creative consultant? What does that mean?
I just said that I would back her up, and I would be there if, and especially helping with the script and making sure the script sort of, there's a lot of blank spots in the story treatment.
These are original stories and original ideas that come out of a world that essentially is in George's head. So the beauty of the collaboration that can continue is as we work our way through these scripts, if we're sitting and saying, I wonder if this character can do that, or does this make sense within the rules of Star Wars? That really, he's the keeper of the flame when it comes to that.
It's the same thing with the first three films. That's all my job is to be the keeper of the flame.
What are you looking for in a director?
Enthusiasm. Obviously, having a sense of how to tell stories within complex worlds like this. It's not going to be people who don't already have some affinity for Star Wars, probably. It's going to be somebody who really appreciates what Star Wars meant to them and is excited to dive in and be a part of this.
She was always been standing right there in front of me, because I've been, brooding over who am I going to get and what am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? And ruminating on it endlessly. And then I sort of almost immediately got up. She was in New York, I was in New York, and I just said, hey, let's go have lunch.
And then halfway through lunch, he said to me, I've been thinking about retiring, and I don't know if you've heard or talked much about that, but he said, I'd really like you to give some thought to stepping in and taking over the company. I answered you pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I said, I would be really interested in doing that.
I don't have to give Kathy advice. She knows what to do. She knows better than I do. So, that's the best part about this, is it's not somebody who I have to explain anything to. I've worked with Kathy for so many years. It is, at least like 35 years. And, in close producing together, just working together, and as friends, and, it's a great relationship. And it's just such a perfect fit, because she actually has all the qualities that are necessary to run a company like this that make it great.
I have a tremendous amount to learn from George. There's things that that I want to preserve within the spirit of this company, and as it moves into Disney, I think it's vitally important to anything we create that we hold on to the spirit of what started all of this. So I would say that's really important to me.
Early on, Kathy brought J.J. and Michael Arndt up to Northern California to meet with George at his ranch and talk about their ideas for the film. George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that they weren't using one of the stories he submitted during the negotiations. The truth was, Kathy, J.J., Alan, and I had discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. George knew we weren't contractually bound to anything, but he thought that our buying the story treatments was a tacit promise that we'd follow them, and he was disappointed that his story was being discarded. I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way, and I didn't think I had now.
It's going fantastically well. JJ, we meet almost every single day. We've got Larry Kasdan, who had worked on Empire and Jedi as a writer. And I think the team that we've assembled, everybody gets along so amazingly well.
Tell us about the time that George asked you to take over. Were you expecting it, and did you say yes right away?
I wasn't expecting George to ask me anything like this, but I will say when he did bring it up and he talked about his own retirement and looking for somebody to come in and really be responsible not only for the company but taking this into the future and protecting his legacy, and when he started to talk about it in that way, I immediately said yes. I just thought it would be an incredible experience and an amazing opportunity.
Let me just talk about the upcoming Star Wars, The Force Awakens. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's, you know, I made the decision to sell the company with Star Wars. I made that decision because I looked at the future, I looked at the fact that I was going to have a baby, I looked at the fact that I was married, and I looked at the fact that I wanted to build a museum, and I looked at the fact that I wanted to make experimental films. So my life was going on a different track. I noticed the last few movies that I'd made were costing the company a lot of money, and I didn't think that was fair to the people that worked there or the company, and so I had made a decision to move ahead on the next Star Wars series, and we were starting to do that. We were working with a writer. It wasn't quite working out, but I was also stepping away a little bit and turning things over to Kathy Kennedy. And so what happened was Disney said, gee, or Bob Iger said, gee, if you really want to sell your company, if you're thinking about selling it, because we were talking about retirement and what are you going to do after all this kind of stuff. And he said, well, if you really want to sell it, you know, we're very interested. So that started that ball rolling. And I knew from, you know, and I had the story treatments or, you know, outlines, and we were we were working on scripts. And so I sold it. But I knew when I sold it, I said, I've tried to make movies where I step away, to sort of Empire and Return of the Jedi.
Right, right.
And after about a couple of weeks, I knew I couldn't do that. I had to stand over the shoulder of the director, help him, you know, whisper in his ear constantly, no, do this, do that, you know, and be there to help guide it. And it was much harder than if I had just directed it myself.
J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams, he's a good director and he's a good friend and all this sort of thing. But he's also a top director, his own company and all this other stuff. And Disney, who was a little nervous, you know, one of the issues was the first three movies had all kinds of issues. They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans. So I said, all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened. You know, it started here and it went there. And it's all about generations, and it's about, you know, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers, and it's a family soap opera. I mean, ultimately. I mean, we call it space opera, but people don't realize it's actually a soap opera. Yeah. And it's all about family problems and that it's not about spaceships. So they decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine, but basically I'm not going to try to, they weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time I said, I'm not going to, if I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all it would do is muck everything up. So I said, okay, I will go my way and I'll let them go their way. And it really does come down to a simple rule of life, which is when you break up with somebody, the first rule is no phone calls. The second rule, you don't go over to their house and drive by to see what they're doing. Yes. The third one is you don't show up at their coffee shop or the things what you're going to burn it. You just say, no, gone, history, I'm moving forward. Because every time you do, and you know, we all learn this from experience, every time you do something like that, you're opening the wound again. And it just makes it harder for you. You have to put it behind you, and it's a very, very, very hard thing to do. But you have to just cut it off and say, okay, end the ball game. I got to move on. And everything in your body says, don't, you can't. And these are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
and
sell
you
them
sold
off.
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
Okay, but having said all that, and having talked to you for the last, and known you for a while, and admired you, I mean, it must hurt you.
well, no,
It's your family. It's
but
the
I-
last story.
but-
It's
but-
your
but-
story.
But in
It's
the end,
you.
But I
It's-
knew there's 3 more stories, and I knew that was going to probably take, to do it right would take about 10 years. And I said, I'm 70. I don't know whether I'll be here when I'm 80. Every 10 years the odds get less. And so I said, and I'm not ready to do that because I want to do these other things. So I have to make the decision on my own that it's time for me to move on. So it wasn't like they were taken away from me or they were and they felt they knew, they wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. I make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships, with different, to make it new.
So are you at peace with this?
Yeah.
As much as you can be.
Yeah. No, I said, look, I'm fine. Then you get to the thing, which is another thing that I'd been through. You do end up with this thing, which is, you got to live with it, and people are going to talk about it and all that kind of stuff. It's like talking about your divorce or something. It's awkward, but it's not painful.
You said in a recent interview that you were planning on developing Star Wars Episode 7 before you sold Lucasfilm. Can you divulge any of the details you were working on?
The ones that I sold to Disney and everything, they came up to the decision that they didn't really want to do those, so they made up their own. So it's
So,
not
like, none of your
it's not the
original
ones that I originally wrote.
What are your hopes for the new Star Wars movie, as they clearly are headed to a new franchise?
Well, I hope it's successful. I hope they do a great job. They've, the original saga was about the father, the children, and the grandchildren. And, that's not a secret to anybody. It's even in the novels and everything. And they've taken it in a different direction. Since I didn't use my stories, I have no idea what they're doing.
George has been quoted. He said the 3 pillars of Star Wars are himself, you, meaning marketing, and the fans. Does your role with Lucasfilm licensing really require you to create Star Wars canon and fill in the blanks for George? How does that all work?
What that meant was that, George is well in control of the movies and the TV shows, and that's his world. So he calls himself the father. Mm-hmm. And the world outside of that is way too big for him to personally supervise. And he's entrusted that to me, and he calls me the son in that holy trilogy.
And the EU is born out of a love for Star Wars. That's what it really is. Carrying on the legacy before it really could do so on its own, like it will now through episode 7, 8, and 9 and all the other films coming out. So there's a bright future for Star Wars, but I think the EU will be a legacy that's mined forever.
Dave Filoni apparently wasn't able to make it today, but I know he wanted to talk about a couple of things.
And canon, George Lucas dictates, what happens in the movies, and he's also contributing to the series. So that's always going to be at the top. Everything else falls right underneath that. It's official. It's part of the official canon. Everything is canon: the novels, the comics, the video games. It's all there. We want it to be a continuous, one single universe where everything, we try to make things get as well as possible. And then when things crop up, we take it case by case.
There's this notion that everything changed and when everything became Legends. And I can see why people think that. But, having worked with George, I can tell you that it was always very clear, and he made it very clear, that the films and the TV shows were the only thing that he considered canon.
How many characters of that Star Wars family exist today?
Well, today there's over 5,000 characters. It's very big, and we have lots of novels, lots of comic books, lots of games, and the movies and TV series, and there's a whole world of Star Wars now that didn't exist.
So is there a book we could all buy so we can know where they were born, who their parents were, what their special powers are, what their neuroses?
There's a lot of them. There's there's got to be at least 24 encyclopedias. And there's encyclopedias to characters, or encyclopedias to aliens, encyclopedia to droids, to spaceships. And then there's like the complete Star Wars encyclopedia, which is in 4 volumes, big. It looks like the Encyclopedia Britannica. And it's just like it. It's got, just got thousands and thousands of entries.
So everything else was a world of fun ideas, exciting characters, great possibilities. But the EU was created to explore all those things. And I know, and I fully respect people's opinion about it, that some of the material said the next canon part of it, okay. But like from the filmmaking world that I was brought into, the TV series, the films were it. They were set in stone.
I had a long talk with Mr. Lucas out at Skywalker Ranch about Revenge of the Sith. And I asked him a lot of questions. We spent a lot of time talking about Jedi and how he wanted the book to feel and stuff like that. And in those days there was none of this kind of canon wars stuff that came about later on.
Right.
It was all canon. Everything published was canon. And so I thought, well, the reason they hired me to write Revenge of the Sith was because of Shatterpoint. They thought I might have the right, be able to strike the tone they were looking for. And so I thought, well, I've already written 2 books in the EU. Why not draw on the EU to kind of expand and inform the context of the story?
So it was not a big change for me when everyone was saying everything's legend status now. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've always understood. It's all legend status.
First of all, when we were writing those books, we were told we were writing canon. So at that time, we were creating canon. And so anybody who says they were never canon is just incorrect.
And there have been times when we wanted to use things from the EU, and I was like, yeah, but we can't use it that way, so I don't want to use it and change it. I don't want to use it and make it something completely different. That's rude. People get into all these debates of what's canon, what's not, and sometimes forget just the special nature of telling a good story.
Dave Filoni and I once had this argument that educated me greatly, because I was all concerned. There was this thing I was recording as Darth Maul for this audiobook, and it wasn't, strictly speaking, consistent with something that we did in Clone Wars. Right. And I said, Dave, what should I do? Should I tell them to change the line? Should I blah, blah? What do you think? And how do I solve this problem? And he just said, Sam, it's good if the stories are different. Well, what do you mean? It has to be consistent. He's like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. These are all tall tales. And they all of the tellings, it's great if it's a little bit different. That's reason to go seek that out, to get a different perspective on the same story. This campfire that night that was told that story, this happened and Ahsoka's lightsaber was blue. But over here, you heard the same story and Ahsoka's lightsaber was green. And that's good. And when I thought about what he said, I'm like, he's right.
I'd had a conference call with what turned out to be the Lucasfilm Story Group as this book is developing. And then I'm 2/3 of the way through and they say, hey, we need you to come out to Lucasfilm because you're going to end up doing a video with, as it turned out, Timothy Zahn was there. And we ended up doing a video about declaring everything prior to A New Dawn Legends, and everything forward is part of the Lucasfilm Story Group era, so to speak. But basically, what it means now is that there are people in the story group that have an eye on everything that is going on in other parts of the franchise, films, TV, other things, toys, action figure, the backs of the cards even, the video games. They have all these things that they're aware of, and so they can actually cue us into opportunities and things to avoid. And that's, that is something that did happen before. But this is a little bit more structured, I would say.
But they become the people that are just making sure everything lines up.
Well, librarians, they don't.
Yeah, I like that better.
They don't have to be listened to.
Right.
Apparently, the movie makers get to do whatever they want to. We novelists,
and then they got to figure it out.
And then they've got to kind of spackle it, whatever.
Can you summarize very quickly, just for those that don't know, what exactly the story group is and what that means to the continuity of Star Wars?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it, and I know fans are particularly interested on the continuity angle of it all.
Yeah, the canon.
But that's
the
really,
legacy.
That's only really one part of it. It's basically a group set up by Kathy Kennedy that's basically in charge of overseeing story development in multimedia going forward. Real transmedia stuff that we've never been able to do before. Because in the past, we've had one camp that was making the films and another camp that was doing the publishing and the licensing and the published fiction. So now by putting them together, we're able to be a lot more coherent, a lot more cohesive, and a lot more connected in our stories going forward.
Right. So the continuity, it was a bit controversial, but it got rebooted, kind of wiped clean, which I think is a good thing. And now moving forward, fingers crossed, everything is just kind of smooth from here on out. It should all line up across.
That's definitely the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we aspire to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like ultimately no one could have predicted in the past that we'd be standing here talking about episode 7 and having no idea what that storyline was going to be. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Like, we definitely love the books that came before, but given the choice of creating a new story on the film where you don't know what's going to happen, it's all brand new, you can totally understand the reason. Just hearing the reaction from the trailer, because nobody saw what was coming at the end. When it came, people shrieked. And
I mean, it's interesting because it puts everybody on the same playing field, because there's no one that has an advantage about having prior knowledge.
It would have been really difficult to make episode 7, 8, 9, trying to fit it into the continuity of all of the books and Mara Jade and the New Jedi Order.
There wouldn't be any surprise.
And that's a big part of Star Wars. A huge part of the original trilogy, and even the prequels, was just not knowing what comes next.
Yeah.
Even with the prequels, you knew where certain characters were supposed to end up, but you didn't know the how. And now we're back in the space where it's a lot like the original trilogy, where you just don't know where the story's going to go.
Yeah.
A big part of what we're doing is like we're encouraging our partners, we're encouraging Marvel and Del Rey to really embrace the ability to tell new. You know, it's like, yes, it makes sense to have our classic characters in those spaces, but who are the new characters that you can introduce?
Right.
What are the new scenarios that you can introduce? So,
and people became incredibly loyal to like Jason, Jaina, Anakin Solo, Mara Jade, Admiral Daala, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So there's no reason why we can't become loyal to new characters that are made up.
Nobody says that you can have to stop loving those characters.
Yeah,
at
those
all.
books are still there.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, how difficult was it for your holocron when it gets brought to you after what 10, 12 years of you maintaining it?
Yeah.
Hey, so we're gonna make more Star Wars movies, and we're just gonna throw a lot of this out. Good luck. Do you have like two versions now?
When you say throw it out, I didn't throw out anything. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
I still have a field that keeps track of everything that we did in Legends. So we can always go back, look at it, say, hey, maybe this character will fit this role. We can go back, use that character. But when we start with the new stuff, it's just sort of refreshing because having a clean slate, you have so much less baggage.
It's very exciting to have this opportunity, but it also comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility that we take very seriously. This is a heritage and a legacy that is obviously very valuable and in many ways is religion to people, and we don't want to do anything that's blasphemous. On the other hand, like heritage and legacy, innovation is also part of it. So we're bringing this into the present and then of course into the future with we think the right balance between the great legacy and heritage that is Star Wars with a significant amount of innovation and the need to continue to keep it relevant and change it with the times.
This has to be new, and it's got to be something that a story that fans have not seen before. And at the same time, it's Star Wars, and you have to allow it to be inheriting, what it's been. And I think the trick is to be forward-thinking, but embrace everything, this incredible foundation that was built before us.
Is there anything you want the fans to know moving forward about The Force Awakens?
What I want them to know is there is so much more where that came from.
This is what we tried to do with the Star Wars saga now. We've tried to create more female characters who can represent so many things, because what we're trying to do isn't just create one type of character. We're trying to create a diverse range of characters, especially female characters that are strong, that are independent. When you look at Rey, on The Force Awakens, she's a female lead. in a whole new chapter of the Star Wars saga. We haven't done a movie for 10 years, and here comes a Star Wars film, and here comes Rey. And what is it? Is it Panic in the Streets? Oh my gosh, a female lead in a Star Wars movie. And then the trailer for Rogue One comes out, and it's another female lead. Oh my gosh, how unfair. We've had probably like 2 million straight film cinematic roles where men have been leads, and now we've done 2 in a row that are women. Well, too bad. Oh well. Maybe there are more coming. I don't know. You know, Rey, she impresses Han Solo. He's like the guy's guy, impresses him, impresses everybody in the audience. She goes up with Kylo Ren, she punks him right away. Like he's supposed to be this great guy, wiped out all these people. I don't know. She took that lightsaber and was like, I'm gonna take you out. And she did, and I'm all for it. And she looks strong. You're trying to create an environment where it's my hope that kind of just like Luke, all he did was open that door, right? He just opened that door, let Leia out, and she's went gangbusters. So I just want to be a part at Lucasfilm of opening this door to a new generation of filmmakers, of women that come into Lucasfilm and can be creative. It's a strong future for Star Wars. Our force for women characters, strong women characters, intelligent women characters, characters of all description. It won't just stop with 2 movies. It's something we're dedicated to for the foreseeable future.
Look, George Lucas is a friend of mine, and he and I were having a good conversation the other day about it. I don't want to say too much about the film.
Yeah,
'cause
definitely.
I also have a lot of respect for J.J. Abrams, and I want to see where they're taking it next. You know, see what they're doing with it. I have to say that I felt that George's group of 6 films had more innovative visual imagination, and this film was more of a retrenchment to things you had seen before and characters you had seen before, and it took a few baby steps forward with new characters. So for me, the jury's out. I want to see where they go.
Let's all repeat the mantra, it's only a movie. And if you think you're going to go into the movie and recapture your childhood, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
I hope people are happy. It seems like, because in Hollywood, remember kids, it's not important if it's of high quality, only if it makes money. So because The Force Awakens made a lot of money, I can't be, it's not ergo, it's good.
He also writes as beautifully as he directs, which is quite incredible. And he writes amazingly fierce and independent women.
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like coming up to you and really, really excited about it. And then there are other people who walk out literally saying that was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those 2 extremes to me is the mark of the type of movie that I want to make.
Actors like to write their own backstories. You want to figure out what you've done and where you've been. But I realized that wasn't really important to the story of Force Awakens. I still made it up myself. And, I tried to show it to JJ, and he, was accommodating, but basically patted me on the head, gave me a cookie, and made me go away. Because, whatever, make it up. I mean, they allude to things that have happened. And to a certain extent, it's not Luke's story anymore. But I think he's an important part of the overall arc of the saga. And again, there's a lot of mystery about him, even within the film. So you have to fill in your own backstory. I'm sure there'll be comic books and video games and novels that tell the story, but...
I'm just going to break in here and make sure that everybody out there realizes he is so significantly important to this next film. You have no idea.
Well, that's good to hear.
Mr. Modesty.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character. But, other than that, I can't really describe more, but it was as shocking to me to read what Ryan had written as I'm sure it will be for the audience.
Were you satisfied and excited in terms of how integral Luke is and was to the story? Were you surprised by what Ryan chose to do?
Yes, I was very surprised. And I have to tell you, and I should have realized that when I read 7, I said, I love everybody's part except mine. And on this one, it was similar in the sense that I said to Ryan, I'm so surprised how you see Luke. Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic. A Jedi has tenacity. He never gives up. He doesn't secrete himself on an island, but you'll see. He's got a really devilish way with storylines. I mean, well, without giving anything away, it's time for the Jedi to end. Are you kidding me? Yeah. I was the most optimistic, hopeful character in all the movies. How could he arrive at a place where he's a cynical hermit? It's beyond comprehension.
So how did you feel when you saw that?
Appalled. Yeah, a Jedi never gives up. If he makes a mistake, he corrects it. I said, Jedis don't give up. I mean, even if he had a problem, he would maybe take a year to try and regroup. But if he made a mistake, he would try and right that wrong. So right there, we had a fundamental difference. But it's not my story anymore. It's somebody else's story. And Ryan needed me to be a certain way to make the ending effective. That's the crux of my problem. Luke would never say that. I'm sorry. Well, in this version, see, I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars. So I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well. But listen, I still haven't accepted it completely, but it's only a movie. I hope people like it. I hope they don't get upset. You can't help but feel some measure of ownership, like Luke wouldn't say that, Luke wouldn't do this. But once we had that conversation, my job was to wipe out what Mark Hamill wants and do my best to realize Ryan's vision. And I thought, I'm going to turn over everything. You usually have a inner mechanism that says, well, this feels right, this doesn't feel right. But all throughout the process, I just said, he'd say, we got it. And I said, shouldn't we do one more? And he said, no, we got it. Well, I said, well, Ryan, if you're happy, I'm happy. And he was my seeing eye dog. So if I've succeeded in any way, it's all because of Ryan. And also if I fail, it's also because of Ryan.
I know that initially you weren't sure if this was the right way to go with your character, but the phenomenal response, I guess, tells you that people really enjoyed it.
Give the people what they want. Kill Luke. Yeah, well, I said to JJ, it's too bad that Luke and Leia can't rush to Han Solo's side. I mean, we won't be reunited, and we'll still be too late to save him, but at least we have some history between us so that when he dies, it has a tragic element that resonates into the next film. As usual, JJ was right and I was wrong. I thought fans would object to the fact that the three of us don't all get together. Yeah. They didn't seem to mind. Now you've seen in the new trailer, Luke says it's time for the Jedi to end. That's terribly shocking. Yeah. I thought, I don't want to go there. I want to be the optimistic, hopeful one like before. Oh, I was frustrated when I read the first script and I said, we don't have any scene, even a brief reunion at all. Mm-hmm. I objected to that and I said, I think the fans are not going to like it. I was wrong. As it turns out, there was no backlash. I mean, it says right in the script, forget the past, kill it if you have to. And you're doing a pretty good job.
I'm trying.
The fact, my first reaction was, can't we push this off until 9? I said earlier, I don't want to repeat myself, I only asked for 2 things. No cameos and a run of the trilogy part. See how well that worked out for me? But you look for scripts that are highly original, and that's why I thought Last Jedi was incredibly daring, I mean, because I remember one thing that was very informative to me, because I would say but we really have to think of what the audience expects and what they want. And he says, no, we have to do the opposite. We have to give them something they don't expect that we want. And I started making the emotional disconnect that I need to go through when I read 7. Not the fact that I was just in at the end, the fact when I realized, oh my gosh, I'll never get to work with Harrison Ford again. That was the first big disconnect. Then the second one was, realizing that, thinking that they'd kill me off in 9, that they were going to, speed it up a little, get rid of the old fogies and focus on the new gang. And then I relished the fact that I had at least a scene with Carrie. Because I kept saying, why would Luke turn off his telepathic powers with his sister? But then what happened with Carrie in real life, so that was so devastating that you go, well, we'll never get the band back together.
You can't go home again. It was never meant to be a revival of what they did in the beginning. It was meant to be a whole new thing with us as supporting characters and a whole new cast. But that really affected me. And I thought, well, I'll do my best with the material they give me. But, like I say, my heart was really affected by that. And that'll never change.
Still keeping that kind of
Well, see, again, and I told Brian this, it's no surprise. I said, I just fundamentally disagree with your concept of this character and how you use him. Now, having said that, I'll do everything within my power to realize your vision. Because, it's not my character to decide. It belongs to other people. They just rent it out to me.
Mark, very understandably, wasn't thrilled about some of the choices in the script. The big things being the place that Luke's head is at, the fact that he's not the Luke Skywalker that we knew, and frankly, the fact that he dies at the end.
It's heavy on him. He thought he's going to be the Luke Skywalker of this trilogy. It's just the realization that in this trilogy, he's not Luke Skywalker, he's Obi.
Well, I thought of what's happening today. I thought, well, what if I don't? I keep popping up.
We just have to reshoot.
I know. Within seconds, they'll just conk me on the head. Stay down, punk.
The scene that we can't know its name.
Oh, yeah. The scene that dare not speak its name.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to make them sorry they ever came up with that idea.
I don't think he ever got to the point where he thought, okay, I understand why Luke has to go at the end of this. But he was completely devoted to making what I had written the most powerful version it can possibly be on the screen.
It's an interesting thing because, you have your own view of how your character should be and how he should be utilized. My character always represented hope and optimism, and now here I am, very pessimistic and disillusioned and sort of demoralized. No matter how this comes out, if I'm wonderful, it's because of him. And if it's terrible, it's also his fault.
Got it? Reloading. Right, what's on that? What's up, please? 20 feet. Reload. Camera reload.
This is Kylo's version of it, where he tells her that he woke up, saw Luke about to kill him, and defended himself. Which I don't think he's lying, actually. In my mind, that was his experience, It's actually Luke who was really distorting the truth when he left out the stuff in his first telling of it. But, I think that it's probably twisted a little bit by Kylo's own anger and his own prejudices against Luke, but I feel like he's actually telling her the truth.
Yes, we're debuting The Mandalorian in November, and I've been very involved in that. In fact, the same story group that works on the films works on the Disney Plus projects as well. So everybody's talking to everybody.
Has there been a check-in with George Lucas at all at any point in this?
Just the very beginning of the process, we sat down with him and he shared with us his feelings of what, the Force means to him, and just all he wanted to say, we wanted to hear. And not about story, we didn't break story with him, but that kind of stuff.
JJ and Kathleen, Lucas has entrusted you with 7 to 9, and in the very first script that Lucas has written, of course, all the world loves the authorship of George Lucas and the world that he created. There was the mythic growling that was written in the script, and I think, Kathleen, you once did away, or you didn't accept the first script that came, and because Lucas had written some parts of this saga, and also he's written a book. And would it be part of the Star Wars canon in the future?
Well, actually, George Lucas never wrote a script for 7, 8, or 9. And the ideas that I think you're referencing are ideas that he had for other possible movies. They were small summaries that represented some thoughts and ideas, but he never wrote any screenplays.
Kathy and I have been working on future Star Wars films. I needed somebody I trusted who could take that franchise and make it work the way I intended it to. So once Kathy came on board, we started working with writers and started working on all the processes of doing the films. So we've got a plan for 7, 8, and 9, which is the end of the trilogy. I have story treatments of 7, 8, and 9. And
George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that they weren't using one of the stories he submitted during the negotiations. The truth was, Kathy, JJ, Alan, and I had discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. He was disappointed that his story was being discarded.
The ones that I sold to Disney and everything, they came up to the decision that they didn't really want to do those, so they made up their own. So it's not the ones that I originally wrote.
But having a plan, I have learned in some cases the hard way, is the most, critical thing, because otherwise you don't know what you're setting up. You don't know what you're, what to emphasize, because if you don't know the inevitable of the story, you're just as good as your last, sequence or effect or joke or whatever, but you want to be leading to something inevitable.
We've got some ideas, and we've got David Benioff and Dan Weiss, who are coming off of Game of Thrones and their big debut on Sunday. And they're sitting down with us, and have been, in talking about what this next saga, what this next 10 years might be. Obviously, Rian Johnson's involved in those conversations because he'll be doing some of that. We've got other filmmakers that we've been working with that are going to be a part of this. Jon Favreau, who's doing The Mandalorian for Disney+. A lot of voices in the room right now because it's an opportunity for Star Wars to really figure out what the next big step is, and it's exciting.
And then they started other ones when I sold the company, and they, a lot of those ideas that were in there sort of got lost. I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy. And I think that philosophy sort of goes beyond any particular time, because it's based on history, it's based on philosophy, it's based on a lot of things.
Since the release of the Disney sequel trilogy, many projects were announced for the future of the Disney Plus streaming service. For the most part, these underperformed or they were cancelled. We could go into each and every project that Disney Lucasfilm has made, but we all know the problems already, and it would take a full video of its own, so maybe we can address those in the future. Since the acquisition in 2012, the creation of George Lucas has been mistreated and mishandled. The fans have also been disrespected time after time, and gaslit with the fallacy that the expanded universe was never considered canon. Disney also refused to take accountability for their own failures, using the tactic of preemptively blaming the fans. They discarded the foundation of Star Wars and thought that they could get by on the brand name alone. Over a decade later, the story continues to move further and further away from the original vision, and now people are pretty apathetic towards the franchise. My hope is that this video will reveal how this began and why Star Wars is in this situation. The Star Wars saga is the 6 movies made by George Lucas and the expanded universe that he authorized, approved, contributed and utilized. By definition, canon cannot be dictated, it's established. And there's countless videos and sources on this channel that back up that statement. If your argument is that George Lucas didn't write the expanded universe, well, he didn't write any of what Disney has made either. But for some reason, people refuse to give the EU a chance, but will then go on to watch every single Disney show, no matter how damaging or disappointing. The Hope Grifters have spread fake news rumours for years about the Lucasfilm Civil War, and that Kathleen Kennedy is going to get fired, and then she'll be replaced by Dave Filoni, and then he'll take over and save Star Wars. If you haven't realised this, let me be the first to say, when she leaves, absolutely nothing is going to change, because the problem runs a lot deeper than one person. There are countless more examples of how Disney Lucasfilm and specific employees have tarnished the name of Star Wars, but I'd rather leave you with a hopeful message. We can continue to enjoy Star Wars by compartmentalizing the difference between Disney Star Wars, which is Star Wars in name only, a separate continuity, and the true original lore, canon and continuity of George Lucas era Star Wars. The latter lives on through the fans that have invested in the property for decades, and they preserve it through consuming and sharing these incredible stories. Star Wars isn't dead, they just don't make it anymore. Disney Star Wars, on the other hand, is a failure, but George Lucas era Star Wars is timeless and it always will be.